Chuck Schumer on MSNBC last night with Rachel Maddow, cut number 2.
It's hard for me to imagine a nominee that Donald Trump would choose that would get Republican support that we could support. So you're right.
And so you would do your best to hold the seat open?
Absolutely.
Senator Cruz, you're on the Judiciary Committee. Does the Reid Rule apply to Supreme Court nominees?
Well, look, what Chuck is saying there is not surprising at all. I think the election has had the effect of really radicalizing Democrats. I think Democrats, the lesson they're taking is that they think Hillary was too moderate and that they need to be more Bernie Sanders and more Elizabeth Warren. And so I think you're going to see an awful lot of Democrats following Chuck Schumer's lead and simply screaming no at everything, trying to stop at everything. I think no matter who President-elect Trump nominates to the Supreme Court, I think the Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail. And I think it is incumbent on Republicans in the Senate to hold the line, to stand together, and we've got to deliver on the promises we made.
And that means, does it not, that 51 votes will be used to confirm a Supreme Court justice if necessary?
Well, the current status of the rules is that Harry Reid used the nuclear option, which meant he blew up the rules of the Senate and lowered the threshold for confirmation from 60 votes to 50 votes. And he did that for every executive nominee, and he did that for every judicial nominee except the Supreme Court. That was a small little area that they carved out. And so for the vast bulk of the nominations that we're going to deal with in the next several months, the threshold is 51. Now, there are 52 Republicans in the Senate. If we stand together, we can confirm our nominees, which is why I think we're going to see some bloody fights over the next several weeks and couple of months. And I think the biggest reason for that is the Democratic base, the far left, demands it. They demand blood, and so you're going to see what we're already seeing the beginnings of it, some nasty accusations, some personal accusations. The Democrats will roll out attacks of racism because that's really their one-trick pony. That's what whenever they don't like something, they accuse everyone of being a racist, so they'll do that again, and it'll get ugly. But once they're done screaming and attacking and throwing personal insults, it's going to come time for voting, and on the vast majority of the nominations, it's a 51-vote threshold, and I believe we're going to confirm President-elect Trump's cabinet. I'm very happy about that. As to the question of the Supreme Court, under the existing rules, that's still under a 60-vote threshold. And what I think is likely, I am hopeful, and I believe the new president is going to nominate a strong, principled conservative to the court. You and I both understand that there's very little, if anything, more important than that. If and when that happens, I think what is likely is that the majority leader will have hearings, and again, the Democrats will run through a circus of trying to attack whoever that nominee is, and then we'll move forward to a vote. And what I think the majority leader is likely to do is bring it up for a vote under the ordinary rules, which means we need 60 votes, and give Democrats a chance to see, will they be willing to, for the first time in history, try to filibuster a U.S. Supreme Court nominee. We'll find that out. If they do, I can tell you the sentiments of the Republican conference is that we will confirm the new president's Supreme Court nominee. The Democrats are not going to succeed in blocking it, and it'll take a little time to play out to see how exactly that happens. Because
the Reid Rule is actually, it takes 51 votes to change the rules of the Senate, not that all judicial nominees except the Supreme Court are confirmed by 51. I want to be clear about this because the Reid Rule is actually about how you change the rules of the Senate.
Well, what happened, I mean, the rules of the Senate that are written down on paper still say it takes 60 for everything. But the rules of the Senate have long provided, so the way if something is consistent with the rule or not is a ruling by the chair. And so you can make a parliamentary inquiry. You can ask the chair, does it take 60 votes or 51 votes to confirm a nominee for Attorney General? And the chair would look at and say, well, under the rules, the answer is 60. And at any point, any ruling of the chair can be challenged, and it can be overturned by 51 senators. And that's also written in the rules, that 51 senators can overturn any ruling by the chair. That's what Reid did, is inquired of the chair, what's the rule for executive nominations for judges, not Supreme Court? Chair answered 60 votes. Reid appealed the ruling of the chair, and the Democrats block voted together as a party to overturn that, and that ruling then becomes a precedent, which is treated like a new rule. And I'll tell you, it was interesting here when that happened. Mike Lee and I and a number of others were discussing it at the time, and we were chuckling and saying, Harry Reid and the Democrats are going to come back to sorely regret this. And I remember Mike and I predicted, I said, this will result in more judicial nominees like Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas, and it will result in much more conservative Republican cabinet nominees. And the reason is simple. Look, on the left, the Democrats don't really self-censor. I mean, they will nominate the most whacked-out left-wing nominees they can find. I mean, they're already putting up, in some cases, darn near Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. So they don't constrain, and Republicans, like the dutiful, sometimes gullible opposition, typically will confirm no matter what lunatic they nominate. On the right, Republicans historically have self-censored, have moderated, have looked for, okay, who can get 60 votes? Who can we get Democrats to? By Reid blowing up the rule and lowering it to 51, one of the reasons I believe President-elect Trump's cabinet is as conservative as it is, and I'm very, very encouraged by the number of strong conservatives in this cabinet, is precisely because Reid blew up the rule and lowered the threshold to 51, which means the Trump transition team isn't sitting there on every nominee saying, how do we get to 60? I think it would have likely changed the contours of the cabinet considerably, and we have Harry Reid to thank for that.
So I want to press you, Senator Cruz. If, in fact, Democrats obstruct, will the Republicans invoke the Reid Rule and appeal the ruling of the chair and confirm a Supreme Court nominee with 51 votes?
I think that question has yet to be answered. What I could tell you is a couple of things. Number one, the majority leader is telling the conference, and this is being echoed by the conference in considerable respect, that we will not allow the Democrats to filibuster and stop the next president's Supreme Court nominee. We will confirm that nominee. And the exact procedural method has not been specified right now. Although, look, I can tell you very simply, Chuck Schumer and Tim Kaine were both saying that if Hillary had been elected and if they had a majority, that they intended to use the nuclear option and lower the threshold to 51 for Supreme Court nominees. And it's not rocket science that the rule should not apply to one party only, that what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
So help me educate the media. You only need 51 votes in the final analysis. You don't need 60.
If the nuclear option is used, as I said, I think what is likely as a first step on a Supreme Court nominee is to bring it up and see if we get 60. I'm skeptical that we do, but the Democrats could surprise us and decide that they don't want to provoke that fight. I think they're so radicalized that's unlikely. But I think the majority leader wants to see if
and it will not be
60 in the first step.
In my view, and I put an entire chapter in The Fourth Way about this, it will not be radical, it will not be new, it will not be nuclear, it will be the second use of the option of the Reid Rule. That's all I think it is, and I don't like the narrative in the media that's developing that the Republicans would be radical if they did this because Harry Reid was the radical here.
That is exactly right, and it is Harry Reid's precedent. And I would note that just about every Republican told Harry Reid, this is where this path ends, that in taking the step, it almost inevitably results in eliminating the filibuster for the Supreme Court, and indeed, it puts the Senate well down the road to potentially eliminating the filibuster for legislation as well, which would be a really meaningful change.